All yours.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Tough Interview Questions, everyone's favorite topic, interviews and interview questions. We're going to try to help get you through some of it here today and give you some help with answering some of those tougher questions that get asked in interviews. So I am Lori Rintoul. I'm one of the employment specialists here at Pathways, and I'm joined by Harvey Easton, who's another one of my colleagues here. We're going to be presenting this material today. Throughout the presentation, we'd love it if you could put in your toughest interview question or a question that you want help answering into the chat, and we'll get to all those at the end and we'll go through them. So starting right off, the first thing you want to do in an interview, you always want to stay positive. You want all your answers to always be positive as much as possible. So often when we do mock interviews, people come in and I'll say, how are you doing today? And I hear a long story about how awful their morning's been, and no one wants to hear that in an interview. So you really want to be, even if you've had the worst morning ever, you're awesome, you're having a great day and you're so happy to be there, and that's it. So, but sometimes in an interview, you have to talk about difficult things or negative things, and that's just the nature of interviews. So what are some of those negative or difficult situations that you've been asked to share? Does anybody, if anyone wants to throw anything into the chat about that, you can go ahead. We'll keep going. Harvey, just interrupt me if anything comes in, okay? Mm-hmm. So the positive sandwich is something we teach here at Pathways, and anybody who's taken FES 2 and 3 has heard this positive sandwich before, but it's worth reviewing because it really can help you change the way that you're perceived in your answer. So you can take something negative and make it sound positive with this technique. So what you're going to do is you're going to use a positive and two positives to surround that negative item. You're going to start with a positive, you throw the negative in briefly, and then you finish it off with another positive. And we're going to go into quite a bit of detail about how to do that here. So you start with a positive, whatever it is, skills, strengths, whatever they're asking about. Explain briefly what the negative side of that is, and then finish it off with a solution or a resolution. This really works well when they ask, what is your weakness, or what are some of your weaknesses at work? So you can really use this well in that case to kind of start off with something that could be a strength or a weakness, explain briefly how it's been negative for you, and then tell them how you've solved that problem and it's no longer an issue for you. So we're going to look at some difficult questions, why employers ask them in the first place. Sometimes they ask one question, but really they're asking another question, and how we can use this positive sandwich to answer those. Okay, Harvey.
All right. Well, employers have a lot of fears when they are recruiting people for positions. Recruiting is very costly to an employer, and it's time consuming, and it consumes a lot of resources. And they want to make sure that they select the best candidate for the position from the applicants. So we're going to go into some detail here as to why an employer asks the questions, why they do, about to address their fears. And they're also focused on wanting to hire the best person for the job. They don't want to have to repeat the process too often because, as I mentioned earlier, it's very costly. And then they're going to ask questions that will bring out their fears. So for example, one common question asked is, what is your weakness? Very, very common in interviews. And what they want to know is, are you self-aware? Everybody has a weakness, and they try to draw that out in an interview, and they want to know what you're trying to do to overcome that weakness, to grow and improve. And they want to know if there is a weakness, a glaring weakness that possibly would make you a bad fit for the organization. And that's part of this question, what is your weakness? So in more detail, how should you answer that question, what is your weakness? And Lori mentioned earlier about the positive sandwich, and this is where the opportunity comes in to utilize that.
Can't I
So,
just say I don't have a weakness, Harvey? Can't I just say I'm perfect?
absolutely not, Lori. Everybody, we all have a weakness. Some of us more than others, but we all have a weakness. Nobody's perfect, and employers don't expect you to be perfect. They know that people are always growing, they're always trying to improve. And when you show your weakness, you show that you're self-aware, and you're also showing that you're willing to learn from your weakness and move beyond it, move to a better space. So the positive sandwich is one way to help you talk about your weakness, but still end up in the positive and sounding great with that employer. So the first thing to do is to start by identifying a quality or characteristic that you could be used to answer that particular question. So first of
Am I supposed to take over here?
yeah, go ahead, Lori.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry.
So first you want to pick a quality, pick something that could also be considered a strength. So even though it might be a weakness for you, pick something that could still be considered a strength. So I pay a lot of attention to detail, could be seen as a strength, even if for you it's a weakness. I'm never on time. No employer sees that as a strength in any light. There's no way to go, I'm always late for everything. That's my weakness. No employer wants to hear that, even if you're just trying to be honest about your weaknesses, because no one wants to hire somebody who's late all the time. So, and also don't choose a quality that would be critical to the job you're applying for. So if you want to say your weakness is that you're shy, that's totally cool, as long as it's a job that doesn't require you to interact with people a lot. So if you want to say I'm really shy is my weakness, if you're applying for a sales role or a customer service role where you're going to be dealing with people all day, that doesn't make a lot of sense. That means you're going to have trouble doing the job. If you're applying for a job as a nighttime cleaner and you're going to be working alone in the building, the employer doesn't care less if you're shy. So really think through, does this make sense for the job? Is this going to impede my ability to do the job, or is this actually something that I could work with? Pick a quality you've been working on improving. And this is probably my number one tip in answering the question, what is my weakness? Pick something that you've either already resolved or are in the process of resolving. If you want to say, my weakness is, I'm not awesome with computers. If it's a job that's not, directly related to working with a computer all the time, you could use that one. However, I'm currently enrolled in a course at wherever, and I'm taking some online courses to improve my computer skills. And so you've already resolved that weakness. You've given them a weakness, you've already resolved it. Done. You've answered the question, you've done your positive sandwich. So does anybody have any ideas on what qualities they might use to answer this question, what is your weakness? Anything coming in, Harv?
Nothing there.
Quiet group today.
Yeah.
That's okay. So once you've chosen your quality that you're going to use, whatever that weakness is that you're going to use, think about the good aspects that are associated with that quality. So the quality is, I pay a lot of attention to detail. Well, how is that a strength? I get the job done right every time. I always meet standards. Past supervisors have praised me for being so focused. So that is the first positive in our positive sandwich. That's the first bun. Okay. So then you're briefly going to talk about why has that been a weakness for you? What is the negative side of that, whatever that trait is that you've chosen? So I pay too much attention to detail. Well, it sometimes takes me longer than other people to complete a task, and I find it hard to multitask sometimes. So that is your negative, your middle of your sandwich. And then finally, you're going to do your other end of the sandwich, the other bun. You're going to talk about the positive side of paying a lot of attention to detail. Some of the things that I've done to make sure that I stay on time are, I do prep work, I get tasks prioritized, I make a checklist, whatever it is for you. And that is your final positive. Now, word of caution about this particular weakness. I would say 90 to 95% of the people we do mock interviews for use this example. And if it's not true for you, it's really obvious to the interviewer. If you're just saying one that you're just saying because you know how to answer the question correctly, it's very obvious to the interviewer that you're just making that up. And also, if you're not telling the truth in an interview, I mean, you don't have to always tell the full truth, but you also can't just make up facts. Because it's going to come out later when you're working. It's going to come out, you know, this woman said she pays attention to detail in the interview. She's not detail oriented at all. It's going to come out at some point. So I really encourage you to think of your own. And if you want any help working through how to answer a weakness, just shoot us an email, give us a call. We're happy to help with that at any time. It can be a little bit tricky sometimes to see your own weakness, honestly. So, you know, for me, it's no secret to anyone who works with me that I have a lot of trouble asking for help. And so for me, when I have to answer this question, I would say something like, you know, in the past, I've had a lot of trouble asking for help because I felt like if I had to ask for help, it meant that I didn't know how to do my job or that I wasn't good at my job. And no one wants to feel like that. But I've learned by having the experience of working with other people who should be asking for help and aren't asking for help, that it actually ends up bottlenecking work and slowing things down for everyone. And that doesn't make sense. So the best thing is, I'm happy to help my colleagues if they need help. Why wouldn't they be happy to help me? So I've really learned how to ask for help. So there's my personal example of how I would answer this question. It doesn't sound like a negative at all. I've identified that I'm self-aware enough to know, you know, I have this issue, but here's how I've worked on resolving it. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. Pull it all together, you've got your positive sandwich, okay? So I'm very attentive to detail. I want to make sure everything is done to the highest quality. Unfortunately, that sometimes means it takes me longer to complete a task. Since time deadlines are important to me, I prioritize tasks and do prep work ahead of time. This way I can be sure the task is done accurately and on time. So that's also a pretty good positive sandwich. Although, like I said, if you are not actually attentive to detail, don't use this example. Use your own experience and situation. Okay, Harv, back to you.
All right. Thank you. That was great, Lori. So let's go back to using the positive sandwich that Lori has talked about just briefly. You can use that technique basically to answer many different questions in an interview. But let's revisit fears that the employer will have, and we can relate the positive sandwich to that. One of the things that employers will often pick up on, if there's a gap in your work history, there may be a logical reason why there's a gap in your work history. Maybe you took time off to raise a family, maybe you took time off to go back to school, but the employer is most concerned about your skills being up to date for the position. That's why they're asking that. And furthermore, they're really concerned that you may not be quite ready to get back to work. So this is something that you need to think through before the interview to explain the gap in your work history. Another one is, why did you leave your last job? A lot of employers are very, very concerned that you're going to badmouth the last employer. And that's something you should never, ever do, because employers talk amongst themselves. And that travels, that gets around. They also want to know how well you got along with other employees. Did you have any conflicts in your last job? And this is one of their fears that they're trying to draw out with this question.
I would go so far as to even say some employers ask this question just to test you and see if you're going to say something bad about your last employer. Mm-hmm. So exactly. Anyone who's been through skills class with me already knows, if you have to say, if you're put in a position where you really only have something negative to say about a past employer and there's nothing to say, you just say, I learned a lot. Mm-hmm. You know, they'll often ask you, how was that previous job? How did you like working there? I learned a lot just covers you. You're not lying. You probably did learn a lot. And you are not saying anything negative about the employer. You never want to do that.
Good point, Lori. Thank you. Here's a good question. This sometimes this is referred to as the elevator speech or your 20-second introductory speech. they want to know, employers will ask this because they want to know how well you can think on your feet. So basically this is time.
Ooh, we went backwards. Sorry, time traveled a little bit there for a second.
Basically, they want to know how well you are for a fit for the job. Based on that question, they want to know how well you can relate past experiences and qualifications to the position. And they also want to know how well you can communicate your relevant skills in the interview. So this is one that when we do a mock interview, a lot of our clients stumble on the 20-second introduction speech. And it's something that it does take a bit of practice, but once you get it down, it's a great sales pitch for yourself at the beginning of an interview. Now, here's another one that employers want to know. They want to know about a time you had a conflict at work with a past employer, and how did it work out? Well, they're doing this to find out if you're difficult to get along with. They want to know how easygoing you are, whether you play well with other employees, and did you resolve the conflict in an effective way? Employers want to make sure that they have harmony in their workforce, and this is one of their fears and why they ask the question about conflict and whether you're one that can work in a team environment and get along with other people. Another one is, what didn't you like about your last job? Well, they want to know if you're a chronic complainer, nosy Nelly. You know, they want to know if you liked working at your last place of employment. Why not? They're concerned whether you will like working in the new position. And again, they want to know if you're a complainer, a gossiper, that they're really concerned about that.
Okay, thanks, Harvey.
Thanks, Laurie.
So next one is, what type of person do you not get along with? I think this question also is a little bit of a test. They just want to see, you know, are you going to be able to get along with whoever works here? And most workplaces have all different types of people working there. If you're kind of person who's going to say, oh, I don't get along with people who are lazy, I don't get along with people who are this, that, or the other thing. Well, you might think that sounds like a good answer. I don't get along with people who are lazy or who don't work hard. Well, if you're going to not get along with anybody, I don't really want you working at my company. I want you getting along with everybody. And there's going to be difficult people at every workplace you ever go to. So the best answer to this question, in my opinion, is, you know, I generally don't have an issue. I get along with everybody. I figure out a way to get along with whoever I work with.
Laurie, we have a question in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
A person wants to know if your reason for leaving was because of layoffs. Should you just say that, or should you find a truthful yet creative way to say it?
There's nothing wrong with saying you were laid off as far as I'm concerned. If you're fired, that's a different story. But if you were just laid off because they didn't have enough work for you, that's a fine answer. I would just say I was laid off, there wasn't enough work. The company lost a contract, whatever the story is. I would stick with the truth on that one.
One more, Laurie.
Mm-hmm.
A person wants to know how to answer the question, I see you have been unemployed for the last however long. Why is that?
Mm-hmm.
They want to know how to answer that.
Well, it depends on what the real reason is. If the real reason is because you've been ill, because you were raising kids, you know, you were in school, I would just tell the truth. Be careful with illness where you want to say, you know, I was off for 2 years because I had a fairly serious illness. It's now 100% resolved and I'm cleared by the doctor to go back to work full time, that kind of thing. Raising kids, no employer is going to bat an eye at that. You know, I was a stay-at-home parent for the last 4 years. Just leave it at that. Don't have to go into a lot of detail. If it is something more challenging, like I was in jail, or, you know, I just struggled to find a job, or there's lots of things that it could be, you want to talk to us individually about those more challenging situations, and we can look at your individual situation and see how we would answer that. So I'm just going to probably leave it at that. So if you have something more challenging and that didn't answer the question enough for you, just shoot one of us an email and we'll talk to you individually about it.
one more, Lori.
Hmm.
If you attempted to be self-employed during the gap in a resume and you get asked about the gap, is it not good to tell employers that you attempted to make stable work for yourself?
I don't think there's anything wrong with telling them that you attempted to be self-employed. The employers, I always think about it from the perspective of what is the employer going to worry about if I tell them this? So what the employer is going to worry about in that case is that you're still going to be trying to run your business and you're not going to be reliable to them. So you would want to say to them something like, you know, I did try self-employment. It wasn't for me. You know, I just prefer a steady paycheck and working hard for one employer, and, you know, self-employment just really wasn't for me, and leave it at that. So they're clear on the fact that you are no longer pursuing self-employment. You prefer to work for a company. But there's nothing wrong with saying, I mean, trying self-employment is something that lots of people have done, and there's nothing wrong with saying that. Okay, are we moving along?
Yep, thank you.
Okay. So when the employer asks you, what questions do you have for us? That can be challenging, and you always have to have questions ready. So it's the worst thing is going, oh, I don't really have any, because you're nervous and you forgot what you were going to ask and all that, which is normal, but you want to have those questions written down. If there's any doubt in your mind that you may remember those questions, write them down. And it's totally fine to pull out a notebook. I have a little notebook like this size, something like this, or even a little bit smaller would be fine. Bring it with you and have your questions written down in there already. That way, if there's anything they mention during the interview, you know, if they say you've got to get a police check or you need to bring this, that, or the other thing in next week, or they want to book a second interview, whatever, you're ready with your notebook, you can write that down. And also you have your questions written down and ready for them, which shows it's so good on so many levels. First of all, it shows you're prepared. Secondly, it shows you've thought about the position and thought of some questions. And thirdly, it shows the employer that, you know, you're interested because you've taken the time to go through and think about what might some of my questions be beyond what's in the job description. So it can't be anything that's in the job description, and it preferably shouldn't be anything that's on their website, because you haven't worked very hard on your research if you're asking them something that's right on their website. So when they ask that question, first of all, they really do want to know if you have questions for them. But they also want to see, are you only asking about the benefits? So one of the questions you should never, ever ask, especially not in a first interview, is about how much the position pays. Don't mention it. Just don't bring it up, because if they think that you're only in it for the money, guess what? They're probably not all that interested in you. Yeah, and the second one is this person really interested in what we're all about? Are they interested in knowing what we are about as a company, as an employer? Do they want to learn more? So if you're sitting there with 3 or 4 questions you've thought up at home when you were thinking about this interview, and you're ready with that, ready to go, that's so impressive to an employer. So much more than just, going, no, I have no questions. You know, I haven't really thought about it. I don't really care. Is what, when you say you have no questions, that's basically you're saying to the employer, no, I don't really care about this interview, and I haven't really thought about it. I haven't thought about what it would be like to work here. So the next question we'll deal with is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Most hated interview question of all of them. I hate this question. Everybody hates this question. And Harvey and I, when we were getting ready for this, we said, this isn't being asked as much as it used to. 10, 15 years ago, they used to ask this question in every interview. They're not asking it as much, thank God, because it's a dumb question. But some of them will, and we still need to know how to answer it. So what they really want to know is, are you interested in what we do in a long period of time? Are you interested in doing what we do, and are you committed to learning about it? Or is this just a stepping stone? You just want to work here for 6 months and then disappear and go work somewhere else? That's not the person they want to hire. They want to hire the person who says, well, I'm really interested in what this company does. I could see myself really, getting into it, learning a lot, and hopefully advancing in the company to a supervisor role, hopefully within 5 years, something like that you want to answer. you want to, or you know, if there's a specific direction you want to go within the business, you know, I'm starting out in customer service, but really my long-term goal is sales. So I'd want to learn as much as I can about the company and the products so that I'd be in a position to then apply for a sales position down the road. Something like that, right? And again, do you have a plan for your future that's going to motivate you to excel for them, to do your best job for the company? Does your future plan align with you know, a reasonable plan within the company? And a lot of times, you know, companies offer funding for training for you. So this might be the start of a conversation with them as well. They may say, you know, we do offer professional development training, whatever. It could be a real jump off to a conversation. So if you were a color, what color would you be? If you were a cartoon character, what cartoon character would you be? You know, there's lots of different versions, an animal, whatever. Star Wars or Star Trek? I've heard that asked in some of the tech company interviews. Really, these questions are just about whether you can think on your feet. They don't care what color you say you would be. They just want to know. It's like a partially, are you aware of yourself? Do you have a sense of who you are enough that you can say, well, I think I would be yellow because, you know, yellow is a bright, cheerful color, and I tend to be a bright, cheerful person. And so I think I would, you know, associate myself most with the color yellow, whatever it is for your personality. And do you have creativity and critical thinking skills? Can you go off the top of your head, just think of a creative answer to a question like this? So this one is more about, they want to see into your personality a little bit and your interpretation of your personality. And they also want to see if you can just think on your feet. What do you use for transportation? Okay, so they're asking this because they don't care how you get to work. They want to know you're going to be able to get to work on time every single day. That's really what they're asking when they ask about transportation. Are you going to be able to get yourself here on time for your shift, stay for your whole shift and finish it? Can you problem solve? Do you have a backup plan? So if your answer is I take the bus and that fits well within their shift times, you know, you can say, you could elaborate and say something like, you know, I use the bus. I've been using the buses in London for many years. I know all the routes really well. And, you know, I make sure to take an earlier bus most times so that I'm at work on time. Easy answer. They're happy with that answer. If it's like, you know, oh, I drive and my car is very reliable and I take good care of it and I make sure I have gas in my tank every day. No problem. You know, if you're getting a ride, I get a ride to work in the morning with my spouse because my spouse works right across the road from here. So it's perfect and starts at the same time or whatever. Whatever it is, you want to reassure them with your answer. You are going to be at work every day on time. You're not going to be a problem. You're not going to be showing up 20 minutes late complaining about the bus. Because everybody knows sometimes buses are late. So if you are taking the bus, you want to assure them that you understand the bus schedule. You're going to make sure to take a little bit earlier bus so you get there on time. Okay, back to you, Harvey.
Okay. There's lots of interview formats that employers use today. Most of you will encounter the one-on-one format, but occasionally they'll bring in additional people to interview you. For example, HR may not know much about what the position actually entails on the factory floor. So in some cases, the HR person may bring in somebody in charge of production from the factory floor that may want to ask you questions. So you may have more than one person in an interview. There's the round robin where they'll ask a series of questions beyond 2 or more interviewers. They'll go around in a circle and just ask you questions. You'll have a panel where, as I mentioned earlier, you'll have peers or superiors that you'll be working with, such as the production manager on the floor, that'll want to know a little bit more about your background and your skills. Situational interviews are interesting. I had one of those a number of years ago for a position I applied for, and it went something like this. They were asking if you were on a spaceship and you crash landed on the moon and you had 4 things for survival, a canister of air, water, a life raft, and a cell phone. What would you use first in your survival mode for your crash landing on the moon? And basically, by pulling out of a situational interview like that, they're looking to see whether you can do sequencing, whether you can use common sense to put things together going forward, and how you would react in certain situations. And then there's the competency-based interview, and that's basically based on past performances. Here at Pathways, we do an eye-hand coordination pre-screening test for some employers, where we have some of our clients that will assemble a 100-piece puzzle, jigsaw puzzle, and we time them on that as a pre-screening tool for an employer that's looking for people with good eye-hand coordination. Telephone interviews in this period of time during the COVID virus are very common. Employers will use that to pre-screen a person to make sure that they meet the basic qualifications that they're looking for. And then if we go further on for screening, we've got phone or in person. And once you get past the phone interview, you'll probably be asked to come in and be interviewed by the HR person. And at that point, then they're looking to see whether you're qualified for the position or not. The hiring manager may or may not sit in on the interview. You may have a technical or a competency-based interview. Mm-hmm. I've done those where they've administered some technological testing.
And especially for welders, Harvey. Welders yes. Always have to do that. They always want to see if you actually know how to weld. Mm-hmm.
For sure. We have a number of manufacturers that will actually administer a welding test as part of the interview. Thanks for mentioning that, Laura. Yeah. And then, of course, today, a new one is virtual interviews. And that's basically what we're doing today. That would be done via a product like Zoom or something like GoToMeeting. And basically, that's where you would do an interview over the internet with the employer. And we have on our YouTube channel, we have an excellent webinar booster that we've done on virtual interviews. And I encourage everybody out there to check out our YouTube channel and to look at that interview on virtual interviews. Now, let's move on.
Well, we didn't talk about psychological testing.
My bad, Lori. Thank you. Okay. Psychological testing, that's basically where they would pull in an outside agency and they would want to see if you're a good fit with the company culture and the company's vision and mission statement. Mm-hmm. And also they want to measure your motivation to work at that particular organization.
Yeah. Some places will do that before you get hired and some will do it right after. Mm-hmm. So they can kind of determine where you're going to fit in with the team or, you know, which team you might fit best with, that kind of thing.
And Lori, we've got a question here. Somebody's asking the question, I guess they want to know how to answer. Tell me about a hard decision you made in your previous job.
Okay, so that's one of the things you would want to think about ahead of time. Before you go into any interview ever, really think back on your last couple jobs and go, okay, one thing that often they ask is about when did you have to take initiative? When did you have to solve a problem? When did you go above and beyond? When you had to make a tough decision? Those are all kind of, a lot of times if you have one or two stories in your pocket, they work for any of those. So you're going to want to sit down ahead of the interview when you're not in the interview room on the hot seat and really think about what would some of your answers be for those questions. And I'm sure most people, if you think back over a job, you'll be able to think of something. And if not, a really good thing to do if you have time and if you're still in touch with some of your former colleagues is just email some colleagues and say, you know, what do you remember about me? Do you remember any challenging situations that we had that I, you know, rose to the occasion? Past supervisors or past colleagues are usually willing to send you a few sentences back and say, oh, remember that time when we had that problem and 2 trucks arrived at the same time and you were the one who figured it out, or whatever it is, right? I think if you prepare ahead of time for those kind of answers, those situational ones, you really want to know before you go in a few situations that you have handy from in your memory that you can use for some of those types of questions. So Oh, this is still you, Harvey. Go
Yep.
ahead.
So we want to know from you, we're going to ask everybody viewing today, what would you want a candidate to tell you in an interview if you were interviewing somebody? Can you give us your answer in the chat and we'll review that? Lori, I've got another question here. A person wants to know, tell me about a time when you felt defeated at work and how did you overcome it?
Okay, so that's, I mean, that kind of goes in the same family as, was there a time when you didn't get along with someone at work? Was there a time when you had a challenge at work? Those kind of things. So again, you're just going to have to do your homework and think for yourself of an actual time when you felt defeated at work. We've probably all had those moments, you know. I personally, off the top of my head, would say, you know, many times when I've, you know, helped clients find employment and then they quit the second day, that's really frustrating because I've put a lot of work into getting the person in this position or helping them get the position, and then they just gave up without even calling for help or asking me how to proceed or anything. So that's very defeating. But you know, the reality is when you work with people, people make their own decisions, and it's no reflection on me that the person decided not to continue with the job. So I just have to call the employer, try to smooth things over, and see if I can fill the position with someone else. That's all there is to do. So it's no point taking it personally when things like that happen. And you know, I would just proceed and hope for the best for that person. So that's the kind of answer I would give. You're going to have to look at your own experience and see, but just think of a time, and then again, try to use the positive sandwich technique again, see how I kind of did there. You know, I got the person a job, which was great, and then they didn't show up the second day, which was crappy and made me feel awful. But on the flip side, I can't really do anything about that because people are people and people make their own decisions. So all I can do is move forward with the employer and hope to maintain that relationship and go, you know, go forward. So I hope that helps. Anything else?
Lori, we've been asked to repeat the question we'd like them to answer. So I'm going to ask everybody viewing today, if you're hiring somebody, what would you want them to tell you in an interview? What things would you like to hear that you feel are critical to the position that you're hiring for? Just see if we have anybody reply.
If you have a widget company and you're hiring people to make widgets for you, what do you want to hear from them in the interview? Anybody?
No.
Nope.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
all right.
one of the big answers for me is I want to hear that the person wants to work here, that they're excited and interested in what we do at my widget company. Why my widgets are the best widgets and why they want to work at my widget company versus the one across the road. That kind of thing. What research have you done on my company to tell me that you are really excited about working for our company versus the one across the road?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't compare them, obviously, but you want to say, you know, I love all the charity work your company does. You know, you guys have won award after award I see on your website, and that's exciting to me. I want to be part of a company that's always pushing forward, always trying to, you know, do better and improve. That's exciting to me.
Lori, we have a couple of responses.
Yep.
Janine once said that she would like them to tell me that they are dependable, skilled in the making of the products.
Yeah.
And Murray said he would want to check if they plan to work long enough to copy my company and make their own, or are they committed to work with the company?
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want us to give them that impression.
Right.
Just coming in to learn what they do so you can go be their competitor. And that was another great, and reliability is, you've heard me say it, you've all heard me say it 100 times, it's still true. Reliability is the number one thing that employers are looking for. They want somebody who's going to show up every day and do their best, not somebody who's going to show up when they feel like it. So yeah, dependable and interested in what they do and excited about their company, those are the things you want to be.
Right. And Todd's replied to you, Lori, or pardon me, Murray has replied to you, Lori. He is saying that he would want to know what expertise they have in making widgets, their education and experience.
Yes, you would want to know that, yeah.
Mhm.
That's
And Murray has also said, if an issue occurs on the job, do they attempt to fix it or ignore it?
yes.
Very good.
Mm-hmm. And that's what a lot of those situational questions are trying to get to.
Right.
Is the person going to just ignore the fact that the ladder's broken? Or are they going to go to the trouble of, you know, tagging out the ladder and talking it through with the supervisor, and so the next person doesn't get hurt?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the last one is just what your toughest question is, which we've been answering them, I think, throughout the presentation. Does anybody else have any more interview questions that have been tough for you in the past that you would like help with how to answer? Throw them in the chat if you do.
While we're waiting for those to come in, Lori, one that I frequently occurred when I was interviewing is an employer would ask me what pay I wanted, what was my pay expectations. And the way I resolved that was the Government of Canada has a website where you can go on and you can search for that specific occupation and you can get a range of pay for that particular occupation. Yep. From the job on Job Bank. You can look that up and there will be a range of salary on there.
Yep, so that's one resource. You guys can also check with us and we'll be probably able to give you a pretty educated guess on what the range would be. And you always want to answer that question with a range. You don't want to say, I want, you know, 35,000. You want to say somewhere between 30 and 40 is generally fair for this type of work.
Right. You don't want to have too low a salary expectation.
No.
Because then you're undervaluing yourself, what you bring to the company. And then again, on the other end, you don't want to be too high and price yourself out of the job.
That's right. And you can always say things like, you know, vacation time is also important to me. So in thinking about a total compensation package at an employer, you know, I would consider salary, benefits, vacation time, you know, and any other perks that are available, professional development, training, things like that. So sometimes it depends on the employer, right? It depends on the type of work you're looking for. But, you know, even things like a work boot or tool allowance can be make a big difference to the salary that you need. The very worst answer to this question, well, there's two bad ones that I can think of. One is whatever you think is fair, because they're asking you because they want to know what you're expecting. So you have to give them an answer. And the second one is, well, there's no way I'm working for less than 18 bucks an hour. That's the second worst answer. Because, you know, if they're offering $17.50, the employer is going to go, well, we just lost that person. And maybe you would work for $17.50. You know, if it's a great job with good opportunities and it's $17.50 for 3 months and then you go up to 20 bucks, who knows? You know, don't close the door like that for yourself. Leave it open a little bit. Worst case scenario, they give you an offer you can't accept because it's too low. You just say, you know, I apologize, that's just not going to work for me. And decline the offer, worst case scenario. But I think in most cases, you know, when you're coming from a situation of being on Ontario Works or ODSP, any full-time job with a salary is going to be better than where you are right now. Any other questions coming in?
No, nothing else in the chat, Lori.
Okay, did we answer everybody's toughest questions?
Oh, hold on. Todd wants to know, how do you respond to, have you attended other interviews? I guess what he's getting at is, are you interviewing with other employers?
I would say if you are actively interviewing, like within the last 2 weeks, then I think it's fair to say, you know, yes, I have interviewed with 1 or 2 other employers. If that employer you're currently interviewing with in that moment is the one where you really want to work, then I would say, honestly, this is where I really would like to be. But you know, I'm also looking for a job right now, so I am putting my resume out. So, but this is really the job that I'm most excited about. So that's how I would answer that question. Okay. And even if you're not most excited about that job and you're just trying to get a job, it doesn't hurt to say that, really.
Mhm.
The employer wants to hear that it's your dream to work there. They want to hear, all your life you've been waiting to go work at their company. And I'm exaggerating. That's not exactly what they want to hear, but they want to get that impression from you that you're excited about working there. You're excited about what they do. You want to contribute to their overall project, whatever it is they're working on.
Mhm.
Even if you're manufacturing parts for something, you're going to be part of making that end product safe for people to use. That's something to be proud of. If you're cleaning, you're part of keeping workplaces healthy and safe. That's something to be really proud of. So whatever work you're doing, you can be excited and proud of it and excited to join an organization that's doing that work.
Okay. Nothing else in the chat, Lori?
Anything else?
No?
All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We enjoyed doing this today, and you'll be able to find this presentation on our YouTube in the coming days. It usually takes us a couple days to get it over there, but all the other boosters we've been doing virtually over the last number of weeks are already on our YouTube channel. So as Harvey said, check it out. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram if you're a social media person, and there will be little ads for the next upcoming boosters. Next week, we are doing Hidden Rules of the Workplace. Not next week, the week after. Next week's Canada Day. The week after that, we're doing Hidden Rules of the Workplace the following Wednesday. And it will be myself and Becky doing that one, I believe.
Great.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, Lori.
Have a great day and stay safe.
Bye for now.